It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio, flavored with a dash of humor. Welcome to intelligent, irreverent talk about plants and the planet they grow on. Your questions, comments, and participation are always welcome on Facebook and Instagram at The Mike Nowak Show and at Mike Now on Twitter.
Good planets are hard to find. Temperate zones and tropic climes. And true currents and thriving seas. Wind blowing through breathing trees. Strong ozone and safe sunshine. Well, good planets are hard to find. Good planets are in demand.
Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com.
Jet streams, perfect air.
And here they are, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
Well, good planets are in demand, right?
Oh, and I just love looking at the photos of the beasts that we show each week before. And
those wonderful platters of tomatoes that were in there too.
Because it's almost that time to start thinking about getting your garden going, and that's what we're going to talk about on today's show. What?
Your mic just got really loud.
I know. I was here, and I don't know what I did. It just we'll back it off a little bit. How's that? A little bit? You okay?
A little bit, yeah. Suddenly it was like, wow, good morning.
I don't know, and I barely touched anything here, and suddenly
Skeet came on. Skeet just popped in, and your mic went boom.
Yeah. Well,
good morning, hello.
How you doing, everybody? Good to have you here, and thank you for watching the show. Don't forget to tell your friends and enemies to subscribe to the Mike Nowak Show on our YouTube channel.
And their enemies.
Right. And relatives too, who are usually enemies. Have them all subscribe and watch the show, or you can listen to the podcast that we put up every week, a couple of days after the show is streamed live, and we do stream live on YouTube, and that's where we encourage you to go to watch the show. We know we have people watching on Schmetabook and also on Twitter. Those numbers are not as big as the YouTube, but you're welcome to watch us anywhere and any way you want to do it. And of course, yes,
I was going to mention, and if you missed last week's show, if you missed the interview with Raj Patel, that is up by itself on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, on YouTube. It's on Facebook too, but on YouTube. You if you missed it, or if you ran out to get your coffee, or you missed something he said, go back and watch it.
Yeah, you should. It's a really, really good interview. He's remarkable. He's a remarkable man. He's a very accomplished guy and does a terrific Sir David Attenborough impersonation, and Sean Connery. So he does a little of both. And if you want to see either one, you have to go back and go to YouTube, and you can see the interview we did with Raj Patel. And by the way, that reminds us that this week is the opening of the One Earth Film Festival, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later on. We've got another great film trailer for you to watch later in the show, and we hope that encourages you to go to the One Earth Film Festival. And I'm looking at the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, which is coming up March 11th. That's in Evanston. And that's another one.
It's an Environmental Association.
Right. Environmental Association. We got to get Bill Curtis on just to do that. Just say the word environment. And Lisa Hilgenberg in preview is laughing about that. We'll have her on in just a second. And in the 10 o'clock hour, we've got some stories that we're going to cover. Bad news out of Skokie, where they approved the Carvana Bird Tower of Death, or Tower of Bird Death. Who knows what's going on in their little
Pez dispenser of
in their tiny little brains. I have no idea. And this March 1st is Tuesday, and that is the day that theoretically, the bulldozers could be rolling at Bell Bowl Prairie up by Chicago Rockford International Airport. We'll have a little bit on that. In fact, we'll have something that got sent to me just yesterday from our friend Domenico D'Alessandro, who was on the show to talk about this several months ago. And he brings up a point that nobody else is bringing up, which is, what's this going to cost? They keep throwing these numbers around. Well, we have $50 million to do this, but nobody's actually said, what's it actually going to cost to change the grade? Because there's a valley there. There's the grade changes over a very short span, and he's looking at numbers and asking questions. And unfortunately, the airport authority has not been transparent at all.
They're not answering any questions.
No, they're not talking to anybody. They're just playing their cards really close to the vest, and we'll surprise you. We'll let you know when the prairie's gone. Hey, we'll say, hey, see, wasn't that fun? So we'll be talking about that and some of the other stories coming up. And of course, meteorologist Rick DiMaio is here as always. And I sent him a little note and said, here's a couple of things you might want to tweak on your tech stuff so we can see if we get less of the dropouts this week. I'm hoping.
We'll see.
I'm knocking on wood here that something like that happens. So, but he'll be talking about, I guess, meteorological spring, which starts March 1st. Hey, everybody. Which I don't
like Jimmy Stewart impersonating Tom Skilling.
Exactly, Jimmy Stewart. Well, no. Jimmy Stewart would be like this.
Impersonating Tom Skilling.
I'm doing Tom Skilling. Hey. Anyway, and actually had somebody write on the Facebook post was asking. I was talking about the weather, and they said, "Well, spring comes later and later." Yeah, but the meteorologists label it earlier and earlier. They say March 1st. That's meteorological spring. Well, there's nothing being planted on March 1st in Chicago. I don't know why they call that meteorological spring.
Blackbirds are back.
Well, you know what? They're not planting seeds either right now. They're who knows what they're doing, but I don't know. But I'll argue that with Rick DiMaio when he comes on.
Can I do some product placement to kind of make the bridge to our guest?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, brand new, hot off the press.
Oh, there it is.
Spinach. And plant-based foods.
Spinach. We've got to talk about that. I mentioned that.
Yep. That's the transition right in.
Right. So why don't we do that? We just fade right to our three shot, as we say in the business, and that's Lisa Hilgenberg, horticulturist at the Regenstein Fruit and Vegetable Garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Good morning, Lisa. Oops, wait a second. I had that set, and there's no reason why it should not have gone on. Boy, that's annoying. I set that. Okay, you're there, Lisa. Good morning.
I'm here. I'm in a screen sandwich between the two of you, and it's so nice to be here. It's great to see you all.
It's great to be anywhere, really.
And great to see you again. I've seen you since last year.
And as you can see, if we go to the wide shot, she's got her orchids there you're in the blue room. It looks like. I know it's white, but it's coming across as kind of blue this morning.
It's between blue and green, I think, but there's a lot of sunshine in this room, and it's nice to be in this room during the morning. I'm usually at work at the garden. Yeah.
Do you work Sundays at the garden?
In years past, we've worked during the season. We've worked every day of the week. It just depends on what's going on and any programming that might be happening. But yeah, in the days of the seed swap, we did work on Saturdays and Sundays. But now my schedule is Monday through Friday, and I'm there every day until about 3:00.
But because as we know, plants grow from 9 to 5. Generally on Monday through Friday, and then they stop over the weekend, so you don't have to worry about them.
It's 24/7 during the season, and we're so excited. March is approaching, and it's such a nice time of year before the work really starts, and we're sort of able to gather, just the tools and the tricks of the trade and kind of get everything set. I'm organizing things in the office. I've been sharpening all of my tools And of course, taking care of all the snow that we've had recently, which is good for the plants for the most part, other than besides the flooding and the ice that's happened. But the snow has been good. And, we're doing all kinds of winter pruning. So just pruning plants when they're dormant and getting things sort of shaped up and cleared out for the spring. So we're excited.
Would you come over to my place and sharpen my tools as well? That's not something.
I got some pruning that needs to get done too.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, really. We've got all kinds of tasks for you if you want to help out. What we should do is start by explaining.
I'm not agreeing to that.
I didn't get to answer that, Mike. Our job is to educate it so that home gardeners and people like yourselves can do those kinds of tasks at home. And so come to the garden, and I'd be glad to do a little tutorial on sharpening a pruners properly, or pruning fruit trees. I think there's some classes too on the website that are involved. Both those topics are involved in.
I'm glad you said that, because I actually have a link on my blog post. If you go to MikeNowak.net and go to this week's blog, there's a link to the horticultural classes at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and there are a ton of them, including several classes you'll be teaching over the course of the season, right?
I am going to teach several classes at the Joseph Regenstein School of the Botanic Garden, and one is a series of 3 classes on organic vegetable gardening. And the first one is on April 2nd. You can sign up on the website. There's one on May 18th, which will be summer in the organic vegetable garden. And we're timing those so that you can take the class and then incorporate some of the tricks and ideas into your garden to get up and running. And then there's an organic gardening for fall in the autumn on August 17th. And then there's a new class called Troubleshooting Tomatoes. I did it last year, actually, so for the first time. So it'll be year 2. And it was a well-received class in mid-June, June 15th.
Yeah.
And so just see some spots starting on your tomatoes.
Some are on Zoom, right? And others are live again?
That's true. Yes. Some are still on Zoom. And I think classes have started, in-person classes are back at the Botanic Garden. So these happen to be on Zoom.
Yeah, and of course you're going to do one on tomatoes, because everybody wants to know about tomatoes. In fact, there are probably people who are going to start planting their tomato seeds today, and you would tell them what, Lisa?
It's too early. It's too early to start your tomatoes. Everybody's chomping at the bit to get out in the garden, and a nice way to start is what you're doing, Mike, is starting some things under lights at in your basement or in a sunny window in your home. It's time to start thinking about that, but choosing varieties is very important. Making sure that you're starting plants like spinach, some of the plants that take a little bit longer to germinate can be started inside and then put out in the garden at the right time. So spinach is one that is perfect to start inside now. But
you can also sow spinach outdoors, right?
Yes, you can. It's all about temperature, and spinach responds to day length. And so as the days get longer, the varietals change a little bit over the season. So it's important to start with the right varieties. And you and I have talked about this in the past. If you go into the University of Illinois website, or you go into a grower's resource like Johnny's Selected Seed, where you can pull up a beautiful spinach sowing chart, you can see that there are different varieties that are appropriate for different times in the year. So choosing the spinach variety is really, really important. Again, spinach responds to day length. And it also, long days, the spinach will start to bolt, which means it's trying to go to seed. And the taste changes of spinach. And so it's important to plant it at the right time. There are a couple different ways to plant spinach, Mike. I know you're working on this at home. Are you going to plant it as sort of a multi-sow spinach, cut and come again type spinach? Or are you going to grow single plants? And so spacing in the vegetable garden is really important. And
explain that the first one to me. What's the difference between those two techniques?
Like you would do with lettuce.
Exactly. So baby leaf spinach, if you're going to grow sort of a row type spinach,
Yeah.
3 to 5 seeds per inch would be perfect. And you can cover those with just
Okay.
a
Okay. Say
half.
that again. You dropped out just as you gave us the number. What? How many per
Oh,
inch?
3 to 5 seeds per inch.
Okay.
So that would be great spacing. And so just a little bit of wiggle in your fingers and along the row, that would be a really nice way to sow those spinach seeds. And a half inch deep, that's really, really shallowly planted, much more
Yeah.
shallow than we think. And
that's,
again,
excuse me, Lisa, that's for baby spinach for a cut and recut type of garden.
exactly. Yep, exactly. For plants that you'd like to grow as single one harvest plants, spinach will respond better if it has a little more space in the garden. So it's going to be there a little bit longer, and you can sow maybe 10 seeds per foot, so more an inch apart. And then you can harvest selectively. As those plants mature, you can harvest every other one, and the spinach that's in between will continue to grow. So it's very space. Yeah. Hi, oh, wow. Hello.
This is our one of our. Whoop, I guess I should pull a microphone over.
Yeah.
That would help. This is a spinach plant that we've been growing hydroponically, and we have some that we started hydroponically and then put into soil. But this is a little spinach plant that's been going for a while. In fact, it's probably going to bolt pretty soon, which means I was hoping it would hang on long enough so I could put it outside. But we'll probably have to start some more plants because it's gonna bolt on us. And it's amazing how fast they bolt indoors too. And
and you can cool them off a little bit, keep them well watered, moist soil, and then keeping temperatures cool and
but we do
backing off on the day length. Well, the lights that you're.
We do though. Our house is 63 in the day, 55 at night, so it's still pretty cool. Or does it need to be even much cooler than that?
No, I think that's probably okay inside. I think outside spinach will germinate at 35-degree soils. So when you're starting spinach inside, avoid the heat mat and just start spinach in very cool soils. So it's almost time to direct sow it in the garden. 2 months before the last frost is about right. 6 weeks.
So and that's the mistake I have always made. And by the way, I want to pop this back up because and Peggy, if you could pop this on the chat, this chart from the University of Illinois Extension. When should I plant? And it's hard to read here, but it's got pretty much everything. And you have to take into account your microclimate. You have to take into account, are you in the north part of Illinois, the central part, or the southern part of Illinois, because they're trying to cover the whole state when they give advice. So those are all considerations. But the mistake I think I have made is I wait too long. And part of the problem, and I'll tell you part of the problem, is because I don't have a dedicated vegetable garden. I have my tiny little lot here in Logan Square, and it's got my perennials, and it's got my trees and shrubs, and it's got it's got my little area, and mainly in when I grow vegetables, I integrate it among all of the perennials, which means that I'm often waiting to clean up the debris because I want the insects to use it to go into spring. You leave the leaves, as they say, and it gives a place for insects to overwinter. So I'm loath to just get it out there and put the vegetables in. So come the early part of March, I'm still protecting those insects. How do I deal with that and try to plant spinach?
How about a pot? How about just direct sowing a pot? You can put very fertile seed starting mix just on a layer of seed starting mix on a pot of potting soil, because seed starting mix is very expensive and you don't need to use the whole pot full. And then just again, direct sow it, sprinkle it over the top of that, and keep it moist. You're able to sort of move that around as the sun changes and as trees leaf out. And a pot of spinach is easy to do. I've done it year after year in my backyard. And then you can thin them out as they come up. Again, they don't want too much competition. So I would try that, Mike, or if you have raised beds or maybe you have a roof on your garage.
Not our garage. We have a roof on the garage, but we're not getting up on that garage. No, no way that's happening. No. There's an old joke about grandma's on the roof. That's we're not doing that one.
Yeah.
But there are places we could put it, and that's the other issue that we have, and this is something you need to think about when you're growing vegetables, is where's the sun? My backyard is on the northern side of my house. At this point, which is good because by the time we get to the end of February, about half the yard is in sun. The other half is still in eternal darkness. And it's tough to plant sun-loving plants in that area where the sun hasn't come yet. So I can't even begin to use parts of the yard for another month or so. And this is something you need to think about, right?
Totally. You really do. And as the season changes, that sunlight will change. You're absolutely right. And I think, there's some crops that the shallow rooted leafy greens, some of the mizunas and arugula, lettuce, very shallow rooted, and you can grow those in a little bit more shade. The peas and beans would be also peas for spring, beans for summer. Those would be crops that you could grow in a little bit more shade. Swiss chard, another. But again, some of the fruiting crops need, as much sunlight as you can give them, 12 to 14 hours a day.
Yeah, right. The leafies, you can get away with that. And I'll tell you, our plan this year is to rescue some of the earth boxes that have been sitting in the garage for a few years. And I think those would be great for some of those leafy products.
Absolutely. And they're beautiful to look at. And, you can think about successively planting those so you can keep your kitchen in all kinds of different obscure microgreens and greens. So just keep planting, harvest something out, or if it was spotty germination, pull it out and start with a fresh planting of another seed. No question about it.
So there's a question for you right there as far as germination on seeds go. If you've got seeds hanging on to for a while, what's a good rule of thumb for how long you would use an old bag of seeds?
Well, seeds have different viabilities. So they don't last forever unless they're in Svalbard, of course, but we hope. But I think vegetable seeds, if they've been stored properly, they're, in the bottom drawer of your desk or in a temperature neutral, humidity neutral place. And if they've been stored properly, you can really, I put together a little chart at the Botanic Garden that we can look at with what those dates are. So tomatoes will last 5, 6, 7 years of seed viability if they're stored properly. Onions, lettuce, parsnips, a little bit less. Onions and parsnips, you need to buy new every year. I would suggest for spotty germinators like spinach, it takes 7 to 14 days to germinate. I would say you want to make sure that you are purchasing fresh seed every year. Spinach is tricky to save seed from as well. There are male and female plants, and females produce the seed, and there are all kinds of different techniques to do that. So spinach is a little trickier to grow, and it's all about the timing in the garden.
I'm glad you say that because traditionally I have not had good experience with growing spinach. In fact, this is like stunning to me that it looks this great.
It looks fantastic. Absolutely. It looks like an older plant that you've been harvesting off of, a few times.
Yeah. And it's not that old, but it's under our Happy Leaf grow lights, and we love got to give them a ding there. Because we love these grow lights and they work fantastically. But outside I have not, and I think part of it has to do with sun. Under the Happy Leaf, I'm getting consistent light, and outdoors where I've grown my spinach, it's not been as consistent, and I have a feeling that might have had something to do with it.
Absolutely. And, just when plants come up and they're very weak little seedlings, give them a drink of liquid fertilizer like fish emulsion or something that you can just sort of pour on the foliage, and that'll sort of boost strength. Carrots, the same thing. They're so weakly rooted at that point, and that's a great technique. Just after plants come up and they're about an inch tall.
You were saying carrots.
Carrots would be another. That's
Yeah.
a more advanced crop to grow well, and
Yeah.
unless you have perfect soil and perfect timing and germination, we think of it as a spring crop. But really, we need to wait a little bit longer on carrot and grow. Start that about May 1st.
Really?
Just when
Okay.
you would put it in the ground. Yeah, because if there's a frost, those little tiny seedlings are very vulnerable to frost damage. And if they are damaged, then they can't photosynthesize and they can't grow well. So keeping spring crops growing well with the moisture that they need, never letting them struggle, is a way to sort of move into the spring garden.
I saw a tip from somebody. It might have been our friends, the Wisconsin vegetable gardeners, who are not called the Wisconsin vegetable gardeners anymore, and I can't remember what they call themselves now. But the idea is when sprinkling seeds for carrots, because you need them to germinate, and you need to get them to germinate, you need that consistent moisture. Put a thin layer of newspaper and keep that hydrated over the top of them, and then when you begin to see them germinate, you can pull it off and go back to regular watering. Have you heard of something like that?
I've explored a few ways to use newspaper in the garden, and I think part of what comes into play for us anyway is whether the ink is soy-based.
Yeah.
If it's organic. And so thinking about that, I thought maybe was the New York Times soy-based? I'm not sure.
If the New York Times isn't organic.
Most are these
It's not
days.
organic. Yeah.
Most are.
But I think generally speaking, even just a little layer of we don't use anything on carrot at all. They're so vulnerable. You have to really have that timing down. If those plants are trying to come up into wet, soggy, heavy newspaper, that wouldn't be ideal. So,
What about a floating row cover?
A floating row cover would be something that could repel insects or pests that could, and also create a little bit warmer.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, Peggy?
And keep a little moisture in as well, as opposed to the heavy newspaper.
Absolutely. It's a good idea.
By the way, that's Lisa Hilgenberg. I don't do this enough, especially for folks on the podcast. Lisa Hilgenberg, the horticulturist at the Chicago Botanic Garden. We've got some questions coming in. Folks, you're welcome to give us your questions. I think a couple of points that you just made. One of them, a comment is, happy 50th anniversary to the Chicago Botanic Garden. And
isn't that exciting?
Yeah, so you guys are celebrating that this year. I was talking to Julie about that at the garden. She says that there will be an event called Flourish the Garden at 50, which is going to happen, I guess, later in the season.
That's true. I think garden-wide we'll be celebrating with some indoor exhibits and events that will recall the history of the Botanic Garden on this particular site for the last 50 years. And we'll look forward to the next 50 years of welcoming visitors to the Botanic Garden. We've planned a beautiful, at least in the fruit and vegetable garden, gold exhibit. So there will be lots of plants that are either gold flowered, gold foliaged, just in celebration of that 50th anniversary. And I think it's fun to sort of look at how we plan these things. We plan on a PowerPoint presentation like this, and these are all the plants that are going to be growing for the next months in the summer. So lots of key plants that have gold and yellow fruit, and peppers and sunflowers and things that will be highlighting our 50th anniversary. So we hope that everyone will come out and see that and help us celebrate.
And I tried to get a copy of that chart there, but Lisa said her lawyers would come after me in a heartbeat if I got anywhere near that. No, I know. But before we break here, very quickly, we've already started talking about certain plants. I want to get into some more, especially the early ones and how to get your garden going. But this is an organic garden, the Regenstein Fruit and Vegetable Garden, correct?
Well, we're not certified organic
No.
according to the USDA, but we are following those protocols when possible. So we are using organic biorational pest control, organic fertilizers. We're using techniques of crop rotation and certainly bed prep, no-till or low-till agriculture. So we are, again, not certified. We are a museum, and we're displaying these plants, and then they're harvested and eventually aggregated by the Windy City Harvest program, and then many of them come back to our cafe at the Chicago Botanic Garden. To the plates of visitors and people interested in heirloom crops and hybrid crops alike. So yeah, it's fun to see these pictures, Mike, of the garden last year, the 2021 fruit and vegetable garden. Pots of edible crops growing around a little pool and pergola. It's such a nice, exciting place to be. That's Autumn Frost, which is a beautiful small butternut squash that is wonderful new breeding. It's sort of a medium length vine. It's very productive in the garden. We're happy to grow that. It's sort of a ribbed round fruit that ripens with that sort of dusky, caramely colored shell.
Cool.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah, so
wonderful.
we'll see.
I wish I had room to grow pumpkins. I know, because the problem is they'll take over your yard. And if you want to grow anything else, you better have some room to
Throw them
grow
up your
pumpkins.
fence.
I suppose I could. I'll try that. We're actually going to take down part of the fence this year to get a little more light in. I think that's going to help us, especially with some of the spring crops. So, all right, we need to take a short break. We'll be back with Lisa Hilgenberg from the Chicago Botanic Garden. Please send us your comments on the chat. We'll try to answer any questions that we can. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We'll be right back.
So this is a very simple par meter, and I'm going to measure the par value of this fluorescent light, which was purchased at a Home Depot specifically for growing and advertised as a seed starting light. Minimally for par value for just seed starting, so just to the seedling stage, you want a minimum of 80, really. 75 to 100 will do the trick. I would say 100 to 150 is far better. But right now, at about a foot above the plants, we're getting 49. So now we're going to, let me plug in our Happy Leaf light. This is our 17-inch Procyon 2.0, and it's a really great all-around light. They also come in 33-inch lights, which I have set up here, which is where I'm going to actually put my seed flat. Let's get it about a foot over. I'm getting a value of 335.
My name is Megan Kosensky, and I'm a plant health care specialist and a grounds person at Bartlett Tree Experts. It's no secret that the world of arboriculture is a male-dominated industry, but there is a fearless group of women out there that are determined to change that, and I'm really proud to be one of those women. Bartlett has been really great about recognizing any kind of roadblocks for different genders, different races, people of different nationalities, and just kind of taking a bulldozer to all of those roadblocks. Every day that I go to work, I find something new that I love about what I do. Every tree needs a champion.
From spring seed and soil treatments to summer foliar feeding to fall stubble digesters, Blazing Star provides microbial tools from tiny biologicals for natural and organic farmers. They have solutions for home gardeners too. And Blazing Star also offers agroecological education and consulting, especially for permaculture work in zones 4 and 5. Learn more about these great folks and great techniques at blazing-star.com. And welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. And there she is, slipping right into the seat. Hello, there's Lisa Hilgenberg from the Chicago Botanic Garden. We have a couple of quick things. There was a question on the chat about whether there's going to be a Chicago Flower and Garden Show this year, and the answer is no. That's kind of done as far as Peggy and I know. We've talked to Tony Abruscato, who ran it for many years, and the pandemic and the idea that, and it's such a difficult thing to put together. The two things sort of combined to put the kibosh on the Flower and Garden Show. So that means you got to go to places like the Chicago Botanic Garden to see your flowers and see them in the wild, sort of.
And the Get Growing Foundation, which was part of Chicago Botanic Garden, does have Plant Truck Chicago.
Right.
So I know you can go check their website to see where the plant truck's going to be.
Right. And we had a question whether there was a cost for the classes. Thank you, Peggy, for answering that. Yeah, they're not free, but they're not that expensive either. And when you got somebody like Lisa teaching, you're getting a lot of great information. So just keep that. And if you're a member, it's less. All right. So that's another reason to become a member.
There's a variety of membership options and some restructured ones this year too. So
yeah,
if you're going to take a lot of classes, check into that.
And our friend Christine says she's starting some cold crops today. Thanks for the spinach tips. And thank you, Lisa, because I'm going to do that. I'm going to put them in containers, I think, this year and get them started outside and see if I can't do a little better than I have in the past. But that leads us to the question I wanted to ask you. What else is, what should people be thinking about right now, and what, often we tell people, please don't compact the soil in your garden in the spring, especially if it's moist. Now, we're still, according to meteorologist Rick DiMaio, in kind of a drought-ish situation here. We're in between normal and drought. If you go north and northwest, there's more drought area. But still, we have not had a lot of rain or snow. And that's always an issue with soil moisture in the spring. But especially if we've had a lot, you want to be careful that you're not smushing down the soil, because once you compact it, it's really hard to uncompact, isn't it?
It's true. You're absolutely right about that. And it is hard to believe that we're still in sort of a drought situation, given the ice that's sort of underlying in the grassy areas and catching all the water. It doesn't look like we're in a drought situation. It's just a good time, and I'm not going to say I told you so, but just a good time to recognize the value of fall gardening, the fall bed prep that goes in to get ready for spring. We don't have to muck around in the wet, sticky spring soils if we've done some of those composting and broad forking or pitchforking, turning the soil in the fall. If you have not done those types of things, a quick rake over the top to clear away any debris that would be on the soil, any sand in our case, we use that on the slippery paths, any debris that's blown into your vegetable beds, get that off first. And then wait for the right time. Don't muck around when the soil is just entirely too wet. Wait until things dry out a little bit. And then use a pitchfork and really dig down and barely lift. It's more about aerating the soil. So if you're walking on the same path through your garden each time, that's important. So you're not compacting the area where you'll be growing vegetables. So all good points, Mike, that you make.
All right. So what other plants are you thinking about at this time of year that you want to get going and not miss the window of opportunity?
Absolutely. I think collards and kale, the brassicas, are really about 4 to 6 weeks from seeding in a tray inside to planting out into the garden. And they're some of the earliest crops that can go out into the garden. Collards, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, certainly. We prefer to grow Brussels sprouts in the fall, maturing into the fall. So starting those June 1st in the garden and having them mature around Thanksgiving. But those cool season crops, there's the group of crops that you can put directly by seed in the garden: radish, spinach, lettuce, and you would wait just, till mid-March to the end of March, and then on into April. to plant some of those by seed crops. So it's time to start thinking about peas. Don't plant peas too early. Carrots, not too early, but getting that timing right is really important. Many seeds have trouble because they start to rot in the ground if the soil is too moist. And so you want to make sure to wait until things have dried out just so. So vegetable gardeners are really weather watchers. It's so important to go out and dig in the soil, see what's going on beneath the surface of the soil. You need to get dirty to do that, get a soil knife and really dig around in the garden and see what's going on. You'll have much better success. And you can tuck in a little row of something just to sort of get the your creativity started flowing and whet your appetite for vegetable gardening without getting the whole thing ready. So anticipate getting this ready, but all the time watching your little first radish crop come up.
What about herbs? Parsleys and others. When's a good time to plant those?
Parsley is certainly, you can plant that with some cold temperatures. So into early May, you could probably put parsley in the ground. I think that cilantro would be a great one to start early. Chervil can take some cold, but there are a whole slew of herbs that prefer much warmer temperatures. Right. So basil, I think.
Yeah.
But
cilantro, when you're talking about cilantro, the warmer it gets, the more likely it is to bolt.
Right. So cilantro is an annual and it goes from seed to seed each year. So that is what the plant is made to do, and it'll bolt to coriander seed. And then you can save those seeds very easily, or it will just self-sow and start the next crop of cilantro. Again, one that's very much related to the temperatures in the soil. It's not the air temperatures, but it's the temperatures of the soil. So it's a cool season crop. It can be started very, very early, and then it doesn't grow in the hot summer. So just start another succession in the fall. Some of those, that's a great message for spring gardeners too, is just keep successively. If you miss the first week, it's still too cold and wet, start the next week and start the same crop again. Keep successively planting those crops through the season. You're bound to get the timing right through that strategy.
We have a question.
What about chives and alliums?
Yeah, and I want to bring that up because you mentioned to me the other day, Lisa, you're having trouble getting a hold of the seed for your favorite chive.
Yeah, it's interesting in the seed market, but Peggy, to answer your question about the chives, yes, certainly. So chives are perennial, and so those are crops that we grow all year long, and we grow those as great companions in the garden. They keep pests away, and they're easily dividable in early spring, so you can create sort of a fencing effect around a area that you might be growing cabbages in this year. Chives are a great plant. Useful plant, flowers, foliage, all of that. So forgiving and easy to grow.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally. And Mike, as far as the seed industry, we're having to sub a lot of crops that we have counted on for years. And one of my favorite chives, Nira chives, was unavailable from a seed vendor recently. And I don't know if our production department has found it or not yet. But there's such a demand for organic crops right now, and I think just in the grocery store you can see that demand. And I think there are a lot more varieties of organic produce available, but there's less seed available, meaning that they're harder to get. And so for a home gardener, that can be very frustrating. So seed saving is certainly something that's exciting to think about. There's lots of subbing in our vegetable gardens. Usually seed vendors will suggest something that's suitable for the time of year that you're interested in planting that crop. The other thing that's so interesting in the seed industry is all the vendors that are selling finished plants. So you can buy tomatoes that are completely finished, and they'll come in a little box or wrapper, and you can plant those directly in your garden when the timing is right. So the vendor tries to match up your area and the gardening zone that you're in to send the plants at the right time, which to me is very, very interesting. I don't have a lot of experience in buying vegetable plants from a vendor. We usually grow those in-house in our production department at the Chicago Botanic Garden. But for home gardeners who don't have access to maybe some varieties they might want, an heirloom, for instance, you can get those Seed Savers Exchange is a great resource. We plant a lot of bare root fruit and things that we get mail order or shipped. So that's a whole nother matter.
There's so many things going on here. A couple of comments. One very funny one. I'm knowing
cilantro hater up there.
Yeah, we've got. William says cilantro is a vile and evil plant and should not be encouraged to propagate. Invasive and does not belong even in the compost pile. Okay, tell us how you really feel, William, about that.
I think some people think it tastes like soap. And so you either love cilantro or you hate it. And many people have frustration growing it because they plant it in the summer and they think of herbs going in the garden in the summer. But all plants have varying tolerances to different temperatures. So cilantro is best grown very early in the spring and again in the cool of the autumn.
And you mentioned chives, a couple of plants. Chives, we've had ornamental chives in the yard for a long time, and I don't even remember where I got them or what variety they are. And just a few years ago, I realized I can cut those and throw them in my salad. And there's a double use for them. They bloom and they're gorgeous. And then they'll send up new stalks. They won't bloom again. I get
fall sometimes. But you can throw the blooms in your salad. You can put the blooms in vinegar and make a chive vinegar.
It's just so much you can do with them. And you were talking about parsley. Okay, my grand experiment based on something Peggy did last year. I took one of those, the big plastic containers you put clothes and whatever else in that you get at the Container Store. I took a couple of them and put them upside down. One over some chard and one over the parsley. Like 3 days ago, I harvested parsley for our mashed potatoes, and it's a little floppy, but it ain't dead. I think it's going to make it through the winter, and I'm just stunned that this beautiful parsley plant is still viable, and because I put this stupid little container over the top of it for the winter.
Good season extension, Mike. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going to do that some more. And I haven't actually looked at the chard. It's I forget what it's called. Kathleen would know. It's I think it's baby chard. And if they make it. And the other thing we've done, because I'm looking at Patsy, who says we had a fabulous harvest from under the grow lights over the past 2 winters of spinach and Roman lettuce. And one of the things I did last year, we grew some kale inside in our under our happy leaves. I took them outside in the spring, put them in the garden, and those guys went nuts for the whole season. So we had a head start on the kale because we had grown it indoors. And then you take it outside, and when it gets a little warmth and some soil, it just rocked, and the leaves were huge and beautiful. And that's another reason to start indoors, because you get a head start on your garden in the outdoors.
Totally. You're absolutely right. And kale, as long as you continue to harvest from the bottom of the plant and you take the lower leaves off, the growth tip will continue to grow. So it's, you don't cut the plant in the middle of the plant with a pruner. So you just sort of push the leaves down and they pop off very easily. Those are great vegetable stories. Thanks for sharing those.
Veggie tales, I guess. And Deb wants to know what happened to her chive, because after 6 years it didn't come back last year. But even perennials have lifespans, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Totally. It may have been too wet. Somebody might have dug it up, which is maybe rare, but it was finished. So it's easy to start chives again in the garden. I even overwinter some herbs in just terracotta pots. I cut them back severely in the fall and I put them in my garage, which is unheated. And I can pull those out in the spring and the chives regrow every year from those terracotta pots.
I have the chives. I just put them in the big grower pots, cover them with leaves. I literally have chive pots that have been growing since about 1990. Seriously.
Oh my goodness!
You're a great grower, Peggy.
Put them in other pots and.
Can you share some with the person who?
Yeah. And what I was going to say to Deb is, if somebody else has chives, most people, not most, but a lot of people thin them out. Because they can get bigger and get them from someone else and.
and sometimes they pop up in other parts of the yard. So I've got chives all over the place, so I can harvest them from almost
Sort of
anywhere.
harvest them, grab the whole bunch of chives together like a ponytail and just take either a little harvest knife or a pruners and cut the whole thing off. And flowers or no flowers, stick the flowers in olive oil or vinegar and eat the rest. And you can chop chives and save those in a ball jar for sprinkling on your potatoes if you're not able to go in the garden and harvest in the winter. Freeze them, totally, yeah.
All right, so we've kind of gone over this, and I want to just get anything we missed before.
And we do need to talk about the orchid show too.
Right, exactly. That's why I wanted to make sure that we've covered everything here. I think the main question most people are going to have, and you've already addressed this, but maybe once again, just to reiterate what you said, is the difference between sowing indoors and out, and which vegetables are going to benefit best from indoor sowing versus the ones in outdoors.
All root vegetables would be sown directly in the garden. That's a good rule of thumb. Plants that don't like their roots disturbed, corn, squash, watermelons, all directly sown in the garden. That's easier and best. However, you balance that with the length of season that some of these crops need. Watermelon's very long season, so we tend to start that inside and then thin those multi-sowed blocks once we get them out to the garden. For gardeners today, think about getting radish and spinach and lettuce ready to go in the garden. Some of the cole crops, brassicas, broccoli, can take a whole lot of cold, but those need to be started inside. So some of the smaller, shallow-rooted crops like lettuce and spinach can be directly sown in the garden very soon. To start inside would be the longer season crops, Brussels sprouts, collards, kale. We talked a little bit about the kales, Mike, and how all the new interesting breeding that's happening with kale and some of those reddish varieties. Dazzling Blue is one that we love, and Scarlet is another with a beautiful pink midrib. And there's a whole slew of interesting plants that you'll see this year at the Botanic Garden. We're really excited to grow the Kitchen Minis series of tomatoes and peppers from Ball Horticultural Company here in West Chicago. And those are crops that are small little tomato cultivars that can be grown on a patio table. So maybe you don't have the right space to grow a tomato in the ground. You can grow a kitchen mini. They're small, indeterminate plants. So we'll look forward to those.
Are those dwarf varieties or a different type of?
I think the breeding is a little different. They're not necessarily full-sized tomato plants. They're cherry tomatoes in a very dwarf plant. So just an 8-inch plant. They're found in 4 to 6-inch pots. There's one called Cocoa, which has a little darker, dusky colored cherry tomato. And then there's another called Red Velvet. And literally they're the most charming tiny little plants that would be beautiful even on a kitchen windowsill. So I'm really anxious to grow some of those crops.
And where can you get those? Do you know?
I'm hoping garden centers everywhere. I think that's a question that we could get back to you on, but I'm hoping that you'll be able to see them in the next year or two at the Chicago Botanic Garden. So you can come and check them out and see what you think. They'd be suitable for a window box, a raised bed, but tiny, small statured plants. And you can, no garden, no problem. I mean, that's sort of the thought.
And what are they called again?
The Kitchen Minis. Kitchen Minis.
Okay. Kitchen Minis. Keep your eyes out for that, folks. You did mention one thing, and before we get to orchids, broccoli. Everybody loves broccoli. I mean, some people don't like broccoli. I can't even imagine what's wrong with them if they don't like broccoli. But broccoli is another one that I found is tricky to grow. Why is that?
Again, probably day length related and timing in the garden. I think, again, the cole crops, the brassicas, really shut down if they're left in their plastic containers too long. So if you go to a garden center and you find a flat of broccoli that you'd like to grow in your garden, it's best to ask the garden center professional, how long has this plant, been in their facility. If it's something that's been there for 2 months, those broccoli roots have completely shut down because they can't push out of that plastic any
Wow.
further. Broccoli and cole crops need to be kept actively growing, and they need a very fertile garden area. And that's why it's so good to grow them at home in your basement. Start a few broccoli starts in the basement at 4 to 6 weeks. Mike, put them out into your garden, and they can take mid to late March temperatures. So they're very frost tolerant. They're some of the hardiest crops.
Well, you
and
say
then choose
mid to late.
like Calabrese. Calabrese would be a really great variety.
I'm sorry?
Calabrese, which is sort of a sprouting broccoli. And you can cut the middle head and then have some regrowth sprouting. There's a purple broccoli that's gorgeous. A lot of times we don't have enough fertility. When crops are working hard, they're just starting to bud and that head is starting to form. That's the time to feed them. Give them a shovelful of compost or a dilute fish emulsion.
Those are some great tips about growing those plants. So I guess we should get very quickly to what's going on at the garden right now, the Chicago Botanic Garden. It is the Orchid Show. And let me pop this up because the title of it is Untamed.
Untamed is right. I think the focus is on orchids that grow where many plants cannot. So they emphasize sort of the irrepressible spirit of orchids, reflecting hope, resilience, and beauty in our unpredictable world. And this is a respite for the senses and for the soul to go through the tropical and all the greenhouses at the Chicago Botanic Garden and view a beautiful display of orchids from all over the world. And again, Untamed, the Orchid Show. It goes until March 27th, which is fantastic. You can buy tickets on our website. And again, the post-orchid show is on the 31st of March from 9 until 4. And I think it's an opportunity to take home your favorite orchids. You can purchase those there. And it's based on your membership level. So if you are a member of the Chicago Botanic Garden, you will have entry early. So I encourage everybody to come to the garden and enjoy. We miss seeing everybody. We had such a great year last year. This year is going to be even better as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. And so I want to see both of you there. I hope you'll come. And
well, yeah, I'm eager to get out myself and do some things that I haven't done in a while. And by the way, I know that Julie McCaffrey is I'm hoping she's listening. She said she was going to be working on seeds in her basement today. And
Yeah,
she's your PR person. And I know she's screaming at the radio, or not the radio, but at the computer right now. Give the website. And so it's chicagobotanic.org. So I would be remiss if I didn't say go to chicagobotanic.org. But of course,
when you get there, you'll see and click on orchids. You get the whole video tour of the Orchid Show.
But
the
of
preview.
course, yeah, you get that. It's right there, and you have all those beautiful shots of the orchids that we just showed here. There are more, and there are videos of it, and they're just fantastic. But you can also go to my website, MikeNowak.net. I've got all the links there too. So that's up. But I just want to say that Cassandra West just wrote to us and said, learning so much from Lisa. She says you're her favorite gardening expert. And
Cassandra West is a fabulous gardener and a great supporter and friend. Thank you, Cassandra. It's nice to know that you're listening.
I'm glad she is too. And I'll tell you, the tip you just gave is something I had never heard before about the brassicas, and make sure the roots are still actively growing, and don't buy plants that have been sitting out in the garden center too long. I had never heard that before, and that's a fantastic tip, which is, as you say, another reason to grow them yourself. Get the seeds going. But you did mention that the broccoli can handle the late March temperatures. Do you mean to get outside? I mean, at that point, you want them out by then. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You can plant broccoli in that very early first group of plants that go in the garden. You can direct sow spinach and radish before then. But you can, that first group that goes out end of March, early April is when we'll begin to put our broccoli starts out into the garden. And again, those will be very young starts.
Right. So get them going right now. Now's the time if you want to get the broccoli going. Yeah, this would be
4
right?
to 6 weeks before. Yes, absolutely.
Well, it won't be 4 to 6 weeks.
And do the garden math. And so you'll.
And the other thing is, as you said, be a weather person, pay attention. So if we suddenly go, and it doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, but if we go into a time where we're getting deluged with rain, that's not a good time to plant. But however, looking at the forecast, it looks pretty dry for the next week, certainly. And that might be an opportunity to think about what's going on in your yard. And let's see if it continues for a longer period than that. All right, folks, everybody head out to the Chicago Botanic Garden, the 50th anniversary celebration this year. Yep. Go harass Lisa Hilgenberg.
We need your support, and I'll see you in the garden, and good growing to both of you and to everybody listening.
Fantastic, and good luck this year, and I hope that everything bounces back from pandemic madness. It's about time, I think. Lisa, thank you so much. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you.
All right. It's the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. More to come. Please stick around.
Well, it doesn't get much better than this. This is a 150-year-old American elm. Its canopy gives some of the best viewing points of the Nantucket Harbor. You just need to climb to the top for the best view. My name is Jim Cook. I'm an arborist in the Nantucket, Massachusetts office. I have the pleasure of taking care of this beautiful elm. Back in 2006, I had just been hired to be an IPM tech and climber for the Bartlett Tree Experts Company. During the winter of 2006, I had the opportunity to climb and prune this elm. It was a difficult and challenging job. I have climbed it a few times since, and each time is a very fantastic experience. And the best part, when working the east side of the canopy, the views of the harbor and Brant Point Lighthouse become epic. I will be the first to tell you that I love my job. I love being an arborist in a beautiful place like Nantucket. It's awesome. It is trees like this that stand out in my mind as the primary reason I chose arboriculture as a profession. But this elm in particular is my favorite tree, and I just wanted to share that with you.
From spring seed and soil treatments to summer foliar feeding to fall stubble digesters, Blazing Star provides microbial tools from tiny biologicals for natural and organic farmers. They have solutions for home gardeners too. And Blazing Star offers agroecological education and consulting, especially for permaculture work in zones 4 and 5. Learn more about these great folks at blazing-star.com.
Welcome to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. Green, gardening, and environment radio with just a soupçon of humor. Or is that a dash? Brought to you by Bartlett Tree Experts. Every tree needs a champion. Go to bartlett.com. Here they are again, Peggy Malecki and Mike Nowak.
All I need is good food to eat and make me healthy, wealthy, wide awake. Lettuce, tomatoes, rutabaga. What about those sweet potatoes? All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good food to eat. All I need is good tools to make me music, porches, lawns,
Whoop! And there goes the music. Whoop! Forgot that. See, there's always one button you don't set properly before. Now that's two for today.
Cruising along to the tune. It was like, whoa, wake up!
Okay, hello. Welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. I'm looking at a tweet that I got tagged in by Local Foods Cook County, part of the extension, Illinois extension,
Sarah.
And
Sarah
probably Sarah. And they're doing something called the Buy Can series. It's Buy State Conservation Action Network. And they it's called Nature is Local, and there are going to be 3 seminars about growing native plants. March 3rd, which is Wednesday, Enrich Your Yard with Native Plants will be taught by Amy Loving, and she's the Nahant March Education Center. Then on the 10th, Prairie Establishment and Maintenance Techniques, Brian Burkholder, Scott County Secondary Roads. And then the 17th, Bi-State Resources and Funding, Scott James, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So if you're interested in native plants and or putting a prairie together, the times are 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Central. And I need to put this link. It is https:// if I do that, that's just going to drive you crazy. It's basically go.illinois.edu/natureislocal. I don't know if you have that.
I can find it.
It's on Twitter. So they tweeted us earlier, and I just happened to see that, and I wanted to make sure that folks got to know about that. And so it's, as I say again, it's go.illinois.edu/natureislocal. And Peggy will get that up there if you have an interest in that. And speaking of prairies, March 1st is Tuesday, and that has been the date that the folks at the Chicago Rockford International Airport Authority have said they will stop considering the the prairie and maybe bulldoze it. I forget exactly. They suspended things until March 1st last fall, when it was revealed that there was a federally endangered bumblebee, the rusty patch bumblebee, on land, and so and this thing is still in the courts. It's and there have been meetings, and folks have gone to protests about it. There was one last Thursday in Rockford because there was a airport board meeting, and folks are still trying to keep the prairie from being bulldozed. And will it happen on Tuesday? It's kind of anybody's guess, because the chair of the board has been making noises that basically they can do anything they want.
Yeah, they're not listening.
Well, they're not. They're not talking
They
to.
don't want to.
Nope.
They don't even hear. It's
La 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 la. Wait, yeah. We know what's going on there, right?
Blah 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 blah.
Okay. So I got an email from Domenico D'Alessandro, who has been on the show, and he's a landscape architect, and he's has put together some ideas about how things could work so that the airport could still expand, because they want to expand. They have all this money. They claim that they're well into it, and it can't be stopped because it's a steamroller. But he has come up with some ideas about how it might be changed. These are not official by any chance. It's just one guy out there saying, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered this? And of course, the airport authority says, we don't even want to talk to you about this. And he doesn't represent anybody but himself.
They don't even say go away.
Right.
They don't even say that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So
he's just la la la.
Yeah. He sent me some photos or graphics basically about what's going on. And his consideration is that nobody's paying attention to how much this is going to cost. That they're, as he says, they're interested in the poetry of it and not the finance of it, the economics of it. And I kind of get that. That's the way people write. It's poetry. But I am sort of surprised that more of the reporters have not focused on the financial aspect of it. And so he sent me, one of the things he sent me, Domenico, was this chart. And it's hard to see, but you might be able to read some of it. He says, these are, okay, let me put up something else first before I send you that chart, because it's this. And what he shows me is that if you look, there's a 39-foot difference in elevation. If you look at the northern part of that red arrow on this graphic, that's kind of where Bell Bowl Prairie is. And then if you look in southern at the bottom part of the arrow, that's a floodplain. There's 39 feet difference. And you can see the airport runways on the right-hand side. If you have a runway,
Heading
you're not
down towards the river.
Yeah, one of the things you can't do is it's got to be on flat ground. It's level, okay? I assume you're not going to have an airport where the ground is not level. So what he's saying is that to make up for that difference, you'd have to spend a lot of money to do it. So this chart says that he did soil calculations to attain level ground and floodplain with a grade of existing runways and taxiways. So 1 acre is 43,560 square feet, he says. The average fill depth would be 30 feet. The volume per acre, 1,306,800 cubic feet compacted soil. And he goes on and on and on, talks about the volume per truck and number of loads, which would be 4,840 20-ton dump trucks. The cost per load, $240, may vary according to fuel costs and other considerations. So he says it puts the cost per acre at $1,161,600 per acre, just to level that. And is this accurate? I don't know. This is his numbers, but it might be. And wouldn't it be nice if the folks at the airport authority would actually say, here's what's going on. And he even sent me, you can see the little red squiggle in the middle of the screen there towards left center is Bell Bowl Prairie. And, Domenico has some ideas about how things might be done. The point being that it's not just about him and what he's doing. It is. Is anybody going to listen? Is anybody going to sit down and talk to people who might have alternate ideas? Is anybody going to do that? And it doesn't look like they're going to do that. He writes, and this is kind of interesting.
And it's so puzzling as to why.
Yeah.
I mean, other than their minds are made up, the money's been paid, etc. It's just.
Yeah. But he says the cost per acre can be a little less if the airport authority haggles given the large volume involved, but it will never be less than the $8,000 per acre cost of already flat ground with excellent road and rail access. He has this idea that swapping out land, and whether that will work or not, again, I don't know. It's just that nobody's talking. There's no communication here about this. It's just their eyes are set on bulldozing the prairie. And he says, we are being asked to commit ecocide and pay over $1 million per acre to bury the floodplain. That is not only ecocide, but an ecological mass grave. To boot, we have not even tackled the impact it will have on the floodway and future flooding events. The airport authority has had since 1994 to figure something out. I had only 3 months and without much time for research. I strongly believe that only focusing on the empathy for natural ecosystems is lost on the airport authority, which has been trying to obliterate the prairie numerous times. And he goes on and says that. So I just wanted to make sure that got mentioned as well, which is there are other considerations, other than the endangered species and the threatened species, and there are a number of threatened species in that area. There's the moral consideration, but what Domenico is saying, what about
it's 1/3 of the remaining gravel prairie in Illinois?
But last week the Board of Trustees, in Skokie reiterated their plan to let Carvana build that bird tower of death in Skokie. And once again, the room was packed, and once again, the emotions ran high, and once again, they ignored everybody who spoke, and I don't get it. So that's when we've got those stories. We've linked the stories. If you go to my website, activists rally as clock ticks towards March 1st deadline to save Bell Bowl Prairie. The one right after that, Skokie gives final approval to Carvana glass tower near forest preserve, despite opponents' fears it will kill birds, and it will. How could it not?
As well,
I can't even imagine how it could not kill birds.
As well as the light pollution and the everything else. The list is long.
Oh, the tackiness of it in general. The billboard. Okay, here's a question I have, and I haven't had anybody answer this, and I don't know if it's possible. Again, not understanding all of the politics, but what if a neighboring community wanted to sue Skokie for violating the billboard rule along the Edens? Is that a possibility? Just asking questions. I don't know if that, is the billboard thing. I know it has to do with whether a property is commercial or residential, but there's been sort of a gentleman's agreement, as we say, along the freeway that there would not be billboards. Well, now it's being violated. If I'm one of the other suburbs, do I start slamming stuff up there too and say, well, you guys did it with Carvana, why can't I do it?
Yeah, that's what is that going to just start the ball rolling of, well, that's technically not a billboard, so we can put our own whatever up.
Yeah,
let's hope not.
And then your friend wrote the story about when public land should be sold, and this is the whole issue in Waukegan about selling land adjacent to the airport, expanding the airport there, and doing a swap. And
to create a different situation, that's creating a buffer. But yeah, same, different. It's not paving it over, but it's still removing and selling.
Yeah, and that's Cheryl DeVore, who's been on our program, who writes for the Chicago Tribune. And a lot of people are concerned about that. What is the precedent it sets? Now, as she writes in her article, this has been done many times, and sometimes it's actually worked. It's actually been to benefit natural areas, but we're running out of open space. It's finite, and we can only do that so many times. So there's going to be. I got a feeling that's going to be controversial up there. So if you want to read about that, we also have that link on the blog post. What else? There was something else that I was, and I can't remember. What else?
We've got One Earth Film Festival in Wild and Scenic,
right.
which you
okay, good.
mentioned.
Yeah. Yes. One Earth Film Festival, of course, we want to remind people that that's going to start this, the third would be, that's Thursday, right?
Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday. That's the 11th annual One Earth Film Festival with a Turn the Tide theme. It's actually March 4th through the 13th. Starts on the 4th is the opening party, which is virtual and in person at the plant. And then some of the events are going to be virtual. Some will be in person. Some will be a mix. You can go to oneearthfilmfest.org for more information on that.
It up, and I think it's actually the I wish my computer.
Yeah, March 4th through 13th is the official dates. With the 4th is the launch gala. There could possibly be something before that. I'm not sure. I'm just
it is 4th through 13th, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the Young Filmmakers Contest Awards will take place virtually on March 12th. The Young Children's Short Film Program virtual watch party slated for 11 a.m. March 5th. And it's free, but a suggested donation of $8. And Cassandra just posted Friday. She confirmed the 4th.
Yeah, Friday. Sorry, Cassandra. I had in my head. But they have the Young Filmmakers Contest, which we actually haven't mentioned to this point.
Yeah. I'm cheating. I'm reading my news brief.
Oh, you can read it from, go to Natural Awakenings.
Within Natural Awakenings.
And where can people get Natural Awakenings, Peggy?
Go to nachicago.com, read it online. The February issue will be going live tomorrow. And it's already out in distribution, starting distribution throughout city and suburbs. We've started, we're not done with that yet, or sign up for the e-newsletter, again, at nachicago.com. Another one, again, is the Wild and Scenic Film Festival, brought to us by the Evanston Environmental Association, and the Mike Nowak Show is a media sponsor for that as well. That is March 11th, 7 to 9 p.m. Tickets are at evanstonenvironment.org/filmfest, and that's a one day or one evening festival of a variety of shorts.
Right.
Short
it's a hybrid event as well. You can either go online or go to Rotary International at 1560 Sherman Avenue in Evanston.
From 7 to 9 p.m.
Yep.
And tickets are $10 for individuals, $18 for groups, and there's a higher level as well, and it is a benefit for the Evanston Environmental Association.
So, and you can go to www.evanstonenvironment.org/filmfest. So www.evanstonenvironment.org/filmfest. And for the One Earth, just go to oneearthfilmfest.org. So we hope folks will take advantage of both of these if they can.
Now there's, I'm just looking through some of the other news that came in, and one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my.
The race to save winter that was in National Geo.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that with Rick DiMaio. And
but this is in the Alps. This isn't just where the Olympics are. It's the same problem in the Alps.
Well, but I think he alluded to that throughout the planet, and that there are places that used to have snow that don't get it. And this was in National Geographic, and this is in the Alpine countries. Boy, they're doing weird stuff like throwing blankets over ice floes to keep them to reflect the sun and keep them from melting. But it's
snow from one season into the next.
Yeah, it says even at 10,000 feet, counting on natural snow has become too risky. So it's they have slope maintenance crews preparing for the season. They're spending another month covering the mounds with fabric to insulate them over the summer. This is when the new season begins. If it's too warm for fresh snow to fall, or even for artificial snow to be made, dump trucks and groomers will spread old snow on the slopes. So if they can save it from one season to another, which just seems insane. In the Alps, so they say figuring out how to stockpile snow on this scale hasn't been easy. Before the crew started stitching the panels together, wind gusts sometimes ripped them apart, uncovering the mounds. Other times the fabric froze solid into the snow. Everything that could go wrong has, says one of the workers there.
And it says 1 or 2 degrees of global warming, or 1 or 2 degrees of warming may not sound like much, but it can determine whether precipitation falls as snow or rain. Turn up the temperature just a notch and snowflakes may never form. That's why the Alps are in trouble, says Yves Lejeune, the scientist in charge of the Meteorological Observatory in the Alps. Sorry, I keep having the ads popping up.
Don't you love that? Isn't that attractive when you go to a website and you just can't even read anything because the ads just keep popping up?
Yeah. It says a lot of the Alp areas were plagued by a series of snow-scarce winters in the 80s and 90s. Machines that make snow became the Alps' first line of defense. In lower-lying regions, millions in investments seemed justified to guarantee a steady tourism season. Winters with light snow were assumed to be outliers back then, but data proves they weren't. And it goes on to talk about how the data is just showing less and less snow hitting in the Alps and sticking around.
Mm-hmm. So we'll mention that to Rick, and Rick sent us a good article also about the use of fossil fuels in the wake of this war going on in Ukraine. I found out something really interesting that I sent to Peggy yesterday, is that we use Restream to send out our signal. So we do the signal here, and it forwards it to Facebook, and I meant Schmetabook, and YouTube and Twitter and wherever else we send it. Turns out they're a Ukrainian company, and they sent out a letter yesterday that I got about how everybody's safe. They moved some of their business out of Ukraine before the trouble started. I had no idea that they were a Ukrainian company. And that's very, very interesting. Yeah. So our best is with them and with their friends and family in Ukraine. And you know, if we were a political show, I would say something, but it's horrifying, is what it is. It's just horrifying to watch it. But back to the environment.
Rick's got a few articles I'm sure we'll be talking about of the environmental effects of this.
Yeah, and there are going to be, oh my God. Well, what's going to happen is it's going to scare everybody going right back to gas and oil. This is the first thing that's going to happen.
Yeah, I've seen headlines already about opening up for drilling again in anything from the offshore to the Arctic Wildlife Refuge.
Yeah, well, we can't possibly go with clean energy now. The world's at war. And so, you know, one thing or another. It's always one thing or another that we can't go to clean energy. We're in a pandemic. We can't go to clean energy. We're in war. We can't go to clean energy. We're stupid. But here's a hopeful article, and for those of you who don't understand why
we need one.
Yeah, we need one here. Don't understand why you're recycling your Xmas tree. I don't even know how I stumbled upon this, but Christmas trees dropped off for recycling in Glenview parks after the holidays will become a habitat for fish in Lake Glenview this spring. Earlier this month, contractors for the village pulled some of those trees onto the ice of a frozen Lake Glenview. When the ice melts, which could be as soon as this week, with high temperatures expected to reach 50 degrees. The trees will sink beneath the waves of the lake. When the lake is restocked with as many as 7,000 fish this spring, the trees will serve as a habitat for the fish. Other trees not sent to the depths of Lake Glenview will be ground to mulch for use in Glenview parks and other sites. And now this is an entirely man-made lake, or human-made or person-made.
Yeah, when they closed Glenview Naval Air Station, part of it was I think the article said where the runways were. Was turned into a lake.
Yeah, it's 45 acres. The average depth is 16 feet and 19 feet deep at its deepest point. The lake freezes over during cold winters, and fish need to be restocked every spring. I did not know that. So that's, well, probably because it's isolated from everything. It'd be interesting to get a fish person to talk about how that works. But the
ichthyologist?
What?
I think it's an ichthyologist. I could be wrong.
I think you might be right. Something pescadoodle, a pescadoodle. and get them to talk about that. But that's cool. And see, there's more than one use for your discarded Xmas tree. Just please don't throw it into the landfill. Okay, and there's one more that I don't think we're going to get to, but it's the headline from CBS was, humans are driving a rare Texas plant that serves as an important food source for bees and butterflies to the edge of extinction. It's a milkweed. It's a Texas milkweed that is basically, because it exists on the margins in Texas, is being extirpated from the state. And once that's gone, it probably won't exist.
Again, by bulldozing.
Yep, exactly. And we haven't even gotten to the butterfly center that has had to close because of the nut jobs running around in our country right now. Oh, well. All right. Well, boy, let's
on that bright note.
On that, really, I just feel so much better.
I said spring's coming. The red-winged blackbirds are back.
That's right. And please give me the sound. What is the call of a red-winged blackbird?
Oh, I can't do a red-winged blackbird sound. It's a multi-tone.
What?
I can't.
And you can't do the Tibetan dual vocals as well? You can't do any of that stuff? All right.
No.
All right. Speaking of the One Earth Film Festival, take a look at this, and we'll be back with meteorologist Rick DiMaio.
ਤੇ ਇੰਨਾ ਪੋਲਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਦਾ ਐਮਰਜੈਂਸੀ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪ ਵੀ ਤਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ Mulai che vedo, troppo gusto, c'è stress ang pedo, ikan kalau kuno. Sabat tayo dia kalah laku.
Terus sampah plastik itu ada di mana-mana, ada di laut, ada di sungai, bahkan ada di darat. Ini dibuat di London, ini dari Jerman, dibuat di USA.
Over 90% of the warming of climate change goes into the sea. 50% of our Great Barrier Reefs are nearly gone. How can you not wake up from that?
Keluar aja, nggak usah dilepot, wes. Ayo keluar, nggak bisa masuk.
जो बड़े हैं उन्होंने तो अपना जीवन जी लिया आगे वाला टाइम हमारा ही है बंद करो जी बंद करो और कोई पर बंद करो If this mine is getting built, Australia has given up the fight against climate change and therefore has given up my future.
Kalian mau nggak plasiknya ada di dalam perut ikan kalian? Jadi kita bikin petisi.
Minä hamin tanya, bengat si jago problem dia ambil. Sebidanya hanya mau pertama.
Take back your trash from Indonesia. Please give this letter on my behalf to England or I'm waiting for the reply.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
Jadi generasi sekarang harus berani bersuara dan harus berani berpendapat atas haknya.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
And welcome back to the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki. We're watching. There he is.
Good morning, Rick.
Morning. Quiet.
Hey, Jack.
Sorry.
Hey, no, Jack, just go ahead. Yeah, there you go, dude.
Come on, join in, Jack.
Yeah, he wants to go outside. Look at him. He's looking out the window and saying, hey, how come I can't be out there? It's going to be a nice day.
Yeah, want me to make him bark again?
Sure. Can you do that on demand?
Who's that?
That didn't work.
Of course not.
Easy. Yeah, easy peasy.
Of course not.
How are you guys?
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Nice bright sunshine you ordered up for us today.
Oh, God, yeah. Nice and bright. A lot of albedo out there right now.
Yeah, and we're almost at the first day of March, and so lots of half of my yard now is out of the shade. And so we were talking about that with Lisa Hilgenberg from the Chicago Botanic Garden earlier, and I have to wait until the sun hits a certain point in the yard before I can plant certain vegetables. And we're getting there, slowly but surely.
Just raise it up. How about that?
You're right.
Just raise
Why
up
not?
the yard.
Yeah. Well,
The sun is nice and warm.
Well, as she pointed out, one of the things I can do is I can put things in containers and move them around to where the sun is too.
Yeah. I mean, if you know how ancient cultures, did a lot of their farming in mountainous areas, it was all that stepped farming. Not only did they, kind of angle things towards the sun, but they figured out how to get the water, the drain from one area to another. So, and here we come into the United States and we make everything flat so that it floods. But that's what happens when you mechanize things, right?
I guess. And, you sent us, we were talking just a little couple of minutes ago about that article you sent about the war in Ukraine and what that's going to do to the oil and gas demand.
And I think more so wheat. Wheat's up almost, I think, about $0.015 in the last couple of weeks. And Russia and the Ukraine collectively supply about a third of the wheat, worldwide. So clearly that's going to have an impact first on, Western Europe, more Eastern Europe. France is the largest producer of wheat in Europe, but obviously that's going to put more pressure on, China, Brazil, and then, of course, here in the United States. And I think the article I sent was all about just like if you just look at Nebraska, a lot of the winter wheat's already been planted. Then you'll have, wheat's kind of weird. You can have winter wheat, spring wheat, summer wheat, different types of grain, comes out of that. I'm not an expert on all that, but I know that people who look at that, obviously you're looking at drought conditions having an impact, flooding conditions, and right now it's very dry in the areas where you typically grow a lot of your spring wheat. That's going to be some concern as we head into the springtime.
Yeah. Going back to Ukraine briefly, this is off of Reuters. Ukraine's a key wheat exporter to Middle Eastern and Mediterranean importers, including Egypt, Turkey, Italy, and African countries.
Yeah, because again, those places they can't grow it as much as you can in some of the countries where you can have maybe 2 or 3 crops. I think what Peg was pointing out is that even though you could grow it in certain parts of the country or certain parts of the world, you still need to import it to provide with the different types of whether or not it's grain going back into the belly of the animals or just, a byproduct, like what you have in, breads and and things like that. And, corn is going to be there as well, but,
and Ukraine also, it says Ukraine exports half of its sunflower products like seeds and oil. And it sells a lot of corn as well. So
that was another thing. Think of the Ukraine as literally twice the size of the Midwest. It's an enormously large country, and it's in that same temperate zone that they'll get moisture coming in off the Eastern Mediterranean, off the Black Sea, parts of the Caspian Sea. They don't get the the huge amounts of Gulf of Mexico moisture that we do here in the United States, but they're in that area. It was always called the breadbasket. They used to call it White Russia because of the fact that it grew so much grain. But as Peg pointed out, sunflowers as well. You drive across South Dakota. Hey, you drive across South Dakota in like late July, it's all sunflowers. It's amazing what that state can grow because it's mainly a dry crop. So if you can get, wheat and sunflowers in a particular area, and then you times it by 5, that's basically what the Ukraine has. In addition to that, natural gas standpoint, Russia is the largest reserves of natural gas in the world. And one of the reasons why they have not capitalized on that, and Iraq, is it Iraq or Iran? It's Iran. I think Iran is number 2. One of the reasons why those two countries have not capitalized on their reserves is they've been too busy fighting among themselves. So the industrial revolution of the 20th century or post-World War II never occurred in Russia, and it never occurred in Iraq. I keep saying Iraq, it's Iran. And because of that, their natural gas continues to sit, and they're not doing anything with it. Now, Russia did do something with it with the Nord Stream 1 and then the Nord Stream 2. And it was back in the middle of January, that the Biden administration decided not to sanction Nord Stream 2. That was because they were kind of concerned that it was going to have an impact on the pipelines, the gas pipelines. Yeah, and Nord stands for north, by the way. Mm-hmm. But they did not want to sanction that second pipeline because Germany literally has to import about 90% of their gas and oil. And because it would have hurt Germany in the middle of the winter time, they did not think that that was a good idea. Part of the reason why Germany needs it is because a few years ago, Angela Merkel hastily switched off their nuclear power plants or productions of nuclear. They're down to 1 now, because they wanted to go full tilt towards a new green economy, renewable energy, things like that. That's okay, but you still need nuclear. You still need to rely on nuclear. I've been saying this for a long time. Nuclear is zero emissions. So when they kind of clicked off from that and went away from completely relying on coal and oil, that kind of painted them in a corner. Especially when all of a sudden they started to say, we have to rely on our gas from Russia, and that almost put Putin in the driver's seat. So he was, very smart from that standpoint, where he knew how to play his cards right by almost pitting people in NATO against one another. So that doesn't mean that I'm supporting Putin. I'm just saying that action that he took was kind of a smart one. And in the end, what we're doing now is we're trying to figure out how to not keep Russia in the game of providing natural gas to, even though it's already kind of 90%, or at least the pipeline is basically done at this point. So the Biden administration just last week got the okay from Germany to go ahead and sanction that gas line. But that was only after it was obvious that, things have gotten so bad in a matter of a week or so that they had to do it. So that's one of the reasons why Biden kind of looks bad from a foreign policy standpoint, because he was playing his cards with the deck that was given to him, which was, I can't just turn this off because what is going to happen to Germany? And Germany was like, you can't do that because we need natural gas during the wintertime. And it's obvious that they do. So there's a lot of consequences that come out of this from a standpoint of energy and agriculture, stuff that you won't read in a book and stuff that you probably won't get from cable TV. You got to be able to sift through news articles and objectively analyze the facts and then come up with, your own kind of conclusions. And they're not good ones either way. You look at it.
Well, yeah. And in regard to nuclear, just to add another point of view, is because we've had people like Dave Kraft from the Nuclear Energy Information Service on the show, and he would disagree with you that nuclear is needed because you say it's a clean energy. The problem is we still have no idea what to do with the waste, and until we can figure that out. And, although I saw an article just the other day, it looks like more nuclear plants are being considered in the United States, but it's been 40 plus years since anything was built in the country. I don't know what the answer is, At some point, I'd like to ramp up all the other clean energy before we go relying on nuclear.
Yeah. Now here's the thing, because now that energy is going to be more in demand, do you then ramp up the technology for renewable energy quicker, or do you at the same time begin to drill for more oil and natural gas?
Well, we know what's going to happen. They're going to drill for more oil and natural gas, regardless of what anybody,
reopen coal plants.
Right. Because
the articles we're talking about in Europe reopening them.
Right. Because it's there. So in the short term, you have to put the Band-Aid on the cut, and then the long term, how to figure out how to fix, someone who has, high cholesterol. You got to do it both ways. You really do, but you can't just say, nuclear, because that nuclear still is the answer. Once you figure out what to do with the waste in a safe way, it's zero emissions. It really is. And it doesn't mean that you completely flip off all the switches on it. And again, one of the reasons why I think Germany is in the position that they are, right, they made themselves more reliant on Russian natural gas. And that ended up being the wrong way to go, unfortunately. And look where we are right now.
Well, speaking of Ukraine, you sent something that's pretty interesting here, and that is a weather map. And there's no weather in Ukraine now, so just letting you folks know.
No weather being reported.
Right. Okay. No, I know, but it's just weird to not have anything there in the middle. And what's the cause of that? I mean, obviously a war, but is it not possible to get report conditions from the country?
Yeah. Well, the way that observations are from airports. So the airports are actually collecting the data and sending a normal way. First off, you can't land an airplane in instrument flight rule conditions unless you have a weather report. All right. So the weather right now has actually been pretty good across the Ukraine. It's expected a little bit more cloudier and maybe some snow by the end of the week. So that's going to slow down any ability for Russian forces air attacks. I know it sounds weird that I'm talking about this, but war games is really all based on your conditions from a standpoint of weather. They really are. And if you don't have observations or any forecast, you can't land. So you can take off pretty easily, but you can't land airplanes. So all of those reports that you would see at the other sites around the rest of Europe and Asia are from functioning airports that have information going from the automated surface observation sites to the real world. I have not seen a map like that other than pre-1990 when the Soviet Union was in play, and you had literally no reports coming out of Russia, coming out of the Soviet bloc countries, coming out of China, coming out of North Korea. When I first started at United Airlines, there was no data over China. There was no data over Russia. You didn't fly over Russian airspace. If you remember, 1983, Korean Airlines Flight 007 was shot down because it had drifted into Russian airspace. 236 people were killed. I mean, murdered, literally murdered, because they drifted into Russian airspace. Now you have all of these, literally every country in the world now provides weather data except for one, and that's North Korea. So I always show my students, I'm like, look, North Korea's got no weather. And then the other day when I'm noticing, I'm like, holy smoke, there's nothing coming of Ukraine, which is it's the largest country in Europe. Yeah. So when you look at that, it's very sad. It really is sad. And then on top of that, you have people like Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and Mike Pompeo praising Putin's shrewdness for how he will go into the Ukraine and pull off what he did. Now, before I said Putin was smart from what he did from an energy standpoint, but that by no means says that I support him in any way. He knew him from that standpoint, but saying that you find his tactics to be admirable, basically says that you don't agree with anything related to democracy, and those people should have their heads handed to them, as my mother would say.
Wow. And I'm just going to issue this once. Just say this once. You're annoying at least one of our viewers by calling it the Ukraine. It's Ukraine. Just so old habits die hard. Is all I'll say about that.
But I'll let the viewer know that my mother's parents were born in the Ukraine, so that makes me 50% Ukraine on the other side.
Really?
So.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, my mother's Ukrainian.
Oh, okay. Oh, and speaking of the one thing I saw that was really interesting the other day, I was watching a bunch of videos coming out of Ukraine, and there was this woman, middle-aged woman, walks up to a Russian soldier, and you were talking about sunflowers, and they do a lot of sunflower growing in Ukraine. And she had her pockets full of sunflower seeds. And she said, I want you to take these sunflower seeds, put them in your pocket so that when you die and your body rots, we'll at least get something good out of it. And the sunflowers will grow. Yeah. And they've been doing this in Ukraine. They've been walking up I saw another video of a guy driving his truck, and he gets to a Russian tank that is run out of petrol. And he stops and he says, well, what's the problem? And they say, oh, we have no more gasoline. He says, hey, I can tow you back to Russia. And then he drove on. They're just sticking it in their faces right now. The Ukrainians it's really, if you want to talk about a miscalculation, Putin never dreamed that they would stand up to him like this, especially Zelensky, who's going to become a rock star out of this, even. And I don't want him to die. And I'm not wishing ill on anything, but he could become a martyr, which would make it even worse for Putin. So it's just remarkable to see them fighting back so fiercely, even though they're completely outgunned at this point.
And it's only been a week. These things change all the time. But real quickly, I remember growing up as a kid. Every once in a while, my dad would take us to the west side of Manhattan, where all the gigantic ocean liners would go back and forth between New York and Europe. And my dad's parents never drove. They never got a license. They never made it past 8th grade. So both of my father's parents were born in Italy, and they would go back over every probably 5 or 6 years. They wouldn't get on an airplane. So they got literally on one of those big ocean liners and went back over every 5 or 6 years. And it was always the thing that you would go on the boat and you would walk around the ship and you would hang out with them before the boat took off. And there was nothing cooler than watching that gigantic ship pull out of one of those piers with a big horn going, then you'd wave.
Everyone,
and
like in the movie.
And then the odd thing is that my mother's parents were never able to do that. They always went, wow, you guys get to go back to your home country. They weren't, because the Ukraine obviously was either post-World War II or part of the Soviet bloc. So it was interesting growing up as a kid, seeing one side of your grandparents being able to go back to their homeland, the other side, unfortunately, before the Iron Curtain fell, or they were just too old at that point. But that is kind of, it's kind of a history lesson that a lot of people are learning how important Ukraine. We always just go say the Ukraine is fine, but if the person wants to be a no, I'm okay with that. How important it is to not only the history of agriculture and what it means from an energy standpoint, and then how that's going. It was just amazing to hear people. I always like to listen to right-wing radio and hear this idiot on 560 The Answer today have people call it and say, boy, I wish people would have had as much regard for the truckers protesting in Canada as they do for the people in Ukraine. And I'm thinking to myself, the two are nothing even remotely comparable at this point. And it shows you that, the feeble-minded, as long as they get a chance to be on the radio, they feel empowered. And sometimes that could be a bad thing because other feeble-minded people will feel the same way.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right, let's get into some of the weather that we've been dealing with. We had some snow this past week, and it wasn't, a big event. Although I had probably 3 to 4 inches here in Logan Square. I know it because I shoveled like 5 walks in my because it was weird. People weren't, for some reason they looked at it and went, it's not enough snow to shovel. So I ended up shoveling
and it's going to melt anyways. So
it pretty much did by the next day. So, but it was good exercise.
I think, as this winter goes, this was probably our 3rd largest snow. So, I mean, we did get, 3 inches at O'Hare. The further north you went, you got more. Finally, those areas across Northern Lake up into Walworth, Racine, Kenosha County got a nice, decent 3 to 5 inches. There was even, some decent lake effect snows that came down across southeast Wisconsin, but this was needed. There wasn't a lot of water vapor, or there wasn't a lot of liquid water in it, maybe 2/10, maybe 3/10 of an inch. But it was well forecasted. I think everybody kind of knew what was going to happen. We got that, first batch that came in during the rush hour, which is never fun. It kind of had a little bit of a lull, and the second batch came in late in the evening. And just like the last snow did, it was gone in 3 days, and this will be gone probably by tomorrow. This time of the year, even though it may not get cold, that sun angle is pretty strong as long as it's windy and it's dry. The snow will essentially evaporate or sublimate or melt or both. And I would not be surprised if pretty much it's all gone by the time we get to Monday afternoon. So seasonal snowfall, which is interesting, was well below normal from that area just between southeast Iowa and St. And the last 3 big snows have crossed that one particular point. So 25 to 30 inches have now come down across parts of central Illinois. A lot of wetness in the last 30 days in this area as well. And even though we got some decent snow out across portions of Nebraska and South Dakota, it's very low amounts. So that whole area that continues to be dry will remain dry. So again, areas of southern Wisconsin, southeast Wisconsin, where you have basically severe drought, did not really get much moisture out of this. Again, only about 2/10. But again, if you look at that area from northern Texas up into the Oklahoma Panhandle, southwest Kansas, northeast Nebraska, or northeast New Mexico, and southeast Colorado, this is the area that if you go back to your history book, in the mid-1930s, this was where you had the beginnings of the Dust Bowl.
Right.
And the Dust Bowl was rooted from the fact that farmers in this area were pressed into growing more wheat because of the stress, the political stress that was going on in Europe at the time. So if you think about it, it's in early to mid-1930s, the same sort of political unrest that's going on now, maybe not to such a great degree, is forcing, or at least will force, some of these farmers to grow more wheat. Now, back then, they just kept saying, well, whatever works, whatever didn't work this time, we'll try it twice as hard the next time. And then they doubled down. By the time we got to 1936, they realized that this ain't working. Now, granted, that's not going to happen again, but it is kind of interesting that the same areas that are in to have more wheat grown are currently under stress. Now, granted, parts of northwest Kansas and Nebraska are doing okay, but it is kind of interesting to be able to use this as a history lesson for students, which, of course, you've probably done already.
Yeah, well, and I'm struck by looking at this map that fully 2/3 of the country is in some kind of drought situation.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, outside of, that early season snow in California and the fact that the Pacific Northwest got pummeled, and of course, most of the area over the eastern United States has been fairly wet, there has not been much relief. It wasn't expected. So typically when you get into these La Nina events, you get that jet stream that comes in from the north. We had a very dry, warm November and December. And even though you may get some decent snows in January and February, you're not going to get the same amount of water out of them as you will with the rain system. Now, that could change because the pattern does look like it's going to produce some wetness coming up here over the next 2 weeks. But right now, what we have is, like you said, Mike, 2/3 of the country at severe, extreme, or exceptional drought in some areas.
And here's month of February in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, the 30-day, you can see there's been very little in the way of any, appreciable moisture over Iowa. And you can almost kind of see where the snow was. This is also where the moisture is. Again, I mean, there are some areas of southern Illinois, parts of the Ohio Valley, where the rivers are near flood stage. Usually you don't get very wet during La Nina springs, but the next 2 weeks and 3 weeks looks very wet in this particular area. So I would not be surprised if we start to see more flooding situations occur in the lower Ohio and the mid-Mississippi Valley for the month of March.
Yeah, we were talking, a friend, we had a conference call yesterday here with a friend of ours who lives in Columbus, and she says it's just nasty and wet, and they can't seem to get rid of it. So it's kind of different from what we've got here. So let's take a look at where we're headed. Here's Sunday's surface map and temps.
Yeah, normal high now is 40. We got up to 31 yesterday. That was a cold day. It's because most of the wind was coming off of deep snow cover. We've lost a bit of that today. So with that weak trough going through and that front coming in from the north, this is basically a flow that comes in from the western high plains. So, near 40 today, you can already feel that sun is kind of higher in the sky. Again, we're now getting, 6:30, and sunset at almost 6:10 or close to 6, I think. But all that'll change, obviously, in about 3 weeks when we hit the equinox.
Yeah.
And then this is so
Monday.
Tomorrow, a weak front kind of comes in from the north, and that means the wind will come in off the lake. So we'll probably have, some mid and high clouds. But again, with that lake now down to 32 degrees, it's typically cold this time of the year. Anytime you get any sort of high pressure system that moves in over Wisconsin and Michigan, we go lake breeze. So I keep hearing forecasters say a mild pattern is ahead of us. I wouldn't say mild pattern. This is late February, early March stuff. And all you need is a little bit of wind off the lake, and you step outside and you immediately are not dressing for cold weather. So because you're not dressing for it, anytime it's 35 degrees out, it's cold. So it's going to be chilly. I think this week just looks chilly. There's going to be a couple of days where it may break 45, but it ain't going to be, I wouldn't call it mild. So again, here's another weak front that comes in from north and west. We'll probably see more clouds on Tuesday. So again, high near 40. And again, this is what you get this time of the year. So this goes down as the first day of March, which is the beginning of climatological spring. And it's nice to know that Tom Skilling is on the bandwagon as well. He now calls it climatological spring as well. So I don't know whether I got to him or the word is out that you don't call it meteorological spring. It's climatological
spring. Okay.
Yeah, because you'll hear people say, well, we call it meteorological spring because it's related to the climate, which is March, April, May. Then don't call it meteorological spring, call it climatological spring. And that's basically what it is. You can still say astronomical spring, which is from March 21st to June 21st, but don't call it meteorological spring. It's not. It's climatological. And I think that phraseology is catching on.
All right. And then getting into Wednesday, not a lot going on there.
Now all you see is just, again, a very persistent wet pattern across the northern or the Pacific Northwest. There's zero flow coming in off the Gulf of Mexico. By the way, parts of Florida, the last 2 days, amazingly warm. Got up to 88 in Leesburg. It was 87 in Tampa, close to 90 in Parkless, Florida. So that allows the Gulf of Mexico to get a little bit of a jump start. But the only reason why it won't feel too bad on Wednesday is the wind's rather light. But you see that big high pressure up over Canada, that's kind of beginning to get pushed southward a little bit. So Thursday's map is going to show that high basically pushed down over the Great Lakes. And when you see that, that means basically 33 degrees for Highland Park, 35 for the lakefront, maybe 38 inland. That's it. So Thursday is actually going to be a cool day with that wind off the lake. And as that high kind of builds off to the east on Friday, big area low pressure develops. Now, what's amazing is that these areas over the Central Plains, and even though they've had some snow recently, the turnaround is going to be phenomenal. Last week, there were some areas that went from 75 to literally 10 degrees below zero in parts of northwest Kansas. And the same thing is going to happen this week on Friday. They're going to be in the mid-upper 70s from Dallas all the way to Kansas City. We'll still have somewhat of an east wind. So, barely 45 inland. Again, those people live up in, eastern Lake County. It'll be like 38 degrees during the day on Friday. Not until that storm system deepens and we finally get a big low that kind of moves out of the plains and moves northward, will we get wet. So it'll be wet, it'll be muddy, it'll be gray next Saturday and Sunday, but at least it won't be cold and it won't be white. So does this mean are we done with snow? I don't think so. I kept looking back at last year, and we went from one of the snowiest Februaries ever to zero snow in the month of March. I mean, we got nothing.
Right.
Matter of fact, the next snow that we had was in April. We actually got like 3 inches in April, but it was in and out of here in a hurry. The pattern does look like it wants to go back to being somewhat stormy around here. So I'm not going to jump off the bandwagon and say no snow, but clearly we don't have any Arctic air coming back at us anytime soon. And usually once you get into March, it's really hard to get below zero. So I said this 2 weeks ago that we were done with the real cold stuff, and it certainly looks that way. But we start out the month of March with a high of 40. We finish up with a high of 53. And it's the 1 month out of the year that you have the greatest range. We've been as cold as minus 12 and as warm as 88. That's a range of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So March is always the kind of month that, you start out, winter-like, and you can end up very much spring-like. But we've also had some really terrible Marches as well.
Yeah. Now,
it's really a hard month to really predict long-term.
Yeah, and looking at this map for next Saturday, it seems like there's a lot going on. But look at this map that you sent. It doesn't look like it's going to produce a lot of rain.
Yeah, and I think part of it also is this is ending by 6 a.m. Saturday, which is why I think I put on there most likely.
Okay.
Yeah. So if this would be something that would end 6 a.m. Sunday or even 6 a.m. Monday, you would probably see a lot more ones and maybe twos in there. So that's why I think there's a pretty good chance that with the pattern the way it is, it wants to go wet. And I think it will go wet. The good news is that we're going to warm up ahead of it so that whatever warmth does come into the southern Midwest is really going to open up the soil. So whatever permafrost is down there is going to loosen up. The rivers will probably completely lose all their ice. There's still a lot of ice in them. But that warmth to the south of us never really gets here. This is the 6 to 10 day, and that takes us out to, I believe, March 3rd.
Yeah.
And this takes us out the 8 to 14 about another week later. And you can see the way that cold is kind of showing up back over the northern Rockies. And when you have cold over the northern Rockies and warmth over the southeast, that means the jet stream is kind of in between those two. And usually when you start on a temperature profile, in between those two regions is where you get wet. So when you see the 6 to 10 and an 8 to 14, this really bodes well for precipitation for the Midwest. Now, hopefully we can take that green and kind of push it up a little bit. And I think that'll happen. But I would not be surprised if this outlook and then the 8 to 14, I think this is the 8 to 14, right? There's the 8 to 14. This will probably help out the grain markets come down a little bit, because I think they were kind of nervous last week with the war breaking out and the dryness out west. So we'll see how that works out. Also, if we can not relax, but get rid of some of the cold air over Europe, because they've been actually pretty cold in parts of Western Russia and Eastern Europe, that with not being able to get that green pipeline. I mean, I heard some Republicans this morning on the Meet the Press and this week talk about now's the time to open up the Keystone Pipeline. That ain't going to do it. That's like saying, you know what, being that you just ate that vanilla ice cream cone, you really should have open heart surgery. That's not what you do here. You fix things short term. That doesn't mean you bring cement things long term. But it just gives them talking points. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Just like when you get a Cat 5 hurricane, a climate expert come on and say, this is why we need to be worried about climate change. So it goes both ways from that standpoint. I get it.
All right. And our Bruce wants to remind you that Canada grows wheat too. So
tons of wheat.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well,
but in Europe, I believe France is number one from the European. France is literally like California. I mean, they grow everything there.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing.
All right. Well, looking forward to warmer temperatures. That'll work for me. And maybe a little rain.
That'll be a while.
Yeah, I guess so.
Just think of this week as not cold. How about that?
Okay. I can do that. It's not cold. Something else other than cold.
Telling yourself it's not cold. It's not cold.
Okay.
It's not cold.
That's right. and you might believe it. All right. Where's Jax? Okay.
And there's Jax. Yeah, he's chilling out.
He's ready to get out there. Okay. Well, I'll let you take him for a walk, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye, guys.
So long, Rick. And I believe that does it for us. Want to thank Lisa Hilgenberg for being on the show, giving us really great, some fantastic growing tips for your garden. So start thinking about it. Start planning. Thanks to meteorologist Rick DiMaio. Thanks to Basil the dog, Lagata the cat. Thanks to Kathleen, who warmed up the coffee a couple of times, and I really appreciate
all of our viewers.
And everybody who's and don't forget to subscribe if you get a chance.
And go download the podcast and give us a rating, please.
Right. All right. Until next time, go green or
go home.
Stadler?
Yeah, what?
Is that it?
Yes, it's over. How'd you like it?
I don't know. I slept through the whole thing.
Well, you didn't miss much.